Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Work Trends with Megan and Biro. Whether you're here to network, learn, or share, we want you to have fun. During this live broadcast and Twitter chat, we'll discuss the future of work with smart and entertaining guests who value today's business and its impact on the world of work for the future. Stay tuned, because we start in 3, 2, 1.
Well, welcome everybody to another informative talent culture work trends live podcast and Twitter chat. And if you're wondering who I am, because you are hearing not Megan's voice, but Tim McDonald, that's me. I am the co-creator of Creating Is, and I like to say I'm a human with a heart, which is why I'm so excited to be part of today's, and you'll find out why in just a minute. But I wanted to first pass along a message from thanks from Megan. She is sorry she can't be here today, but wants to give a special thank you to all the talent culture friends and sponsors, and especially our special guest, Susan Steinbrecher. So today we are going to be talking about the heart. Hence why I was so excited about this topic. It should be a heartwarming, enlightening hour. And encouraging emotional connections between managers and employees is a key to better performance and improved employee engagement. Today, we will discuss leadership and the 7 principles of heart-centered leadership with co-author Susan Steinbrecher. Heart-centered leadership is centered on the concept that ethical leadership must start from within, and it's based on 7 principles that promote trust, authenticity, caring, and transparency. We are so lucky to have Susan as our guest today. Susan Steinbrecher is a business consultant, professional speaker, and licensed mediator. She is president and CEO of Steinbrecher & Associates, Inc., a management consulting firm that specializes and provides professional development services in the areas of executive coaching, group facilitation, and leadership training. Susan's expertise has positively impacted companies worldwide, including Bank of America, Capital One, Delta Airlines, and even Starbucks. And she is a co-author of Heart-Centered Leadership, which we will really dive into today. How are you, Susan?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we are so excited to have you here, and I say let's just jump right into the questions because we got a lot that we want to jump into, and we'll be right here, and then we're going to do this for 30 minutes and be over on Twitter, and people are already over there on the Work Trends hashtag talking and going on. But let's get into the first question that we have for you today, Susan, which is, what are the 7 principles that promote trust, authenticity, caring, and transparency?
Well, that's an excellent question. So they really are what my co-author, Dr. Joel Bennett, and I call the 7 principles of heart-centered leadership with their corresponding virtues. And so the first is what we call know thyself, and that is really a commitment to personal growth, right? It's about looking in the mirror and owning who we are, how we show up, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but taking personal responsibility and accountability for that. So that's our first principle is the importance of knowing thyself. And another principle is don't judge or assume, instead come to understand. The reality is that most of us, get caught into judgment every day. We make judgments and assumptions about other people very, very quickly. And we know that our brain is sort of hardwired to do that for safety and security purposes, which is why we always have to overcome that natural tendency to just jump to conclusions or jump to judgment. So this one's really saying, instead of judging or assuming, how about stepping back and asking some questions around what's actually happening here and why kind of thing, so that you can come to understand what's actually happening. Another principle is they need what you need, and that really is about, at the end of the day, no matter who we are, what our income is, or whether we're the boss or the employee or whatever that is, at the end of the day, our needs are pretty much the same. We all want to be valued and appreciated, cared about, listened to, trusted, etc. Another is called letting go, and that's just detachment and trust, and that's always hard for a lot of leaders, is to kind of let go and trust outcomes and be clear about what you want as your end game, but letting go of maybe the process of how to get there. And another is called know the impact, know your impact of your words and actions. And this is one that I find I do a lot of executive coaching, and this is one in particular that really trips leaders up, is they forget they're little goldfish swimming around in glass fish bowls, basically. People are looking through that fish bowl and see you swimming around doing your thing, and often the leader is not mindful, aware, or conscious of they're making an impact with everything they say and do or don't say or do. But the truth is people are observing everything and making decisions, about that leader as a result. And then we have one that's called associates have a choice. So in other words, they're going to either follow you or they won't. And there's you can make people do things for a certain length of time, but that's not a sustainable strategy, right? What you really want is someone's commitment, not compliance. And then the final, principle is what we call care for the heart. And that is that principle is really about taking care of that leader, that leader taking care of self emotionally, physically, spiritually, intellectually, mentally, etc. And so those are the 7 principles that really become sort of the roadmap of how does one lead in a more heart-centered way.
Wow, I'm sure we could take each one of those 7 and create a whole show off of each one of those. But for now, let me ask you, just as you were talking about those 7, how do we really encourage and build emotional connections between managers and employees?
Yeah, thank you, because honestly, that's really important. And there's people that have asked me, they said, well, why would you want that? I said, well, it kind of goes back to that, do you want to build commitment or do you want to build compliance? Because the compliance thing only lasts as long as the manager's sitting around. As soon as they leave, that's when people go and do whatever they're going to do. And the commitment means I've committed to a course of action because I believe in it or I believe in that leader or whatever that is. And then you're much more likely to get higher performance levels, higher engagement levels, higher productivity. And, so what we're really saying here is if you take really good care of that employee will take care of your customer. Your customer will therefore take care of the business. And so this is really about building those connections. And you do that through open dialogue, showing genuine care for the whole person, not just the worker, but the whole person who happens to have a life outside of work, by the way. Showing genuine interest in that individual, and those kinds of things, taking time for the person, empowering that person, trusting that person, setting appropriate, sort of expectations with boundaries, setting them up for success. Those are all ways that you really build that connection.
I really love that from the standpoint of I really do feel like there's, this whole life working thing, but, and I talk about, very much what you're talking about quite a bit. And one of the challenges I always have, so I'm really curious what your answer is to this, is what is the business case for leading the heart-centered way?
Yeah, and what's interesting is we're seeing more and more evidence of this, which is really great. It's like you kind of know it intuitively it's going to be the right approach, but now we've got more and more research really showing that and indicating that. Like over the past 20 years, there's been a significant amount of data that's showing that investing in that human element, that human being, is a profit-making proposition. So for example, Towers Watson, conducted a study of 50 global companies, and they compared those with sort of low regard for that engagement strategy versus a high regard for such. And the study really found that those companies with the low engagement had an average operating margin under 10% versus those that had the high focus, high strategy for engagement. Average, 1-year operating margin was close to 3 times higher, or just 27%. That, another research is 100 best companies to work for, Fortune 100, that we've matched companies on that list with those that are not on that list, basically. And typically what we find is companies on that list typically outperform, in some cases 2-to-1, to their competitive market segment. And really in the list of qualities that make up those best companies to work for are based on employee attitudes or based on perceptions of being treated with respect and fairness and strong communications. Of course, all, qualities that comprise heart-centered leadership. So there's more and more data every day coming out that really connects that engagement level, that really provides that positive return.
Wow. That's very encouraging to hear. I'm very, very glad to be hearing that there's data to actually back this up. So now that we know that there's a good business case for it, how can we realistically apply these 7 principles of heart-centered leadership in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's a matter of, okay, first, let's get clarity on what they are, right? And then how do I do this? So, for example, if you take principle 1, know thyself, and we purposely, Dr. Bennett and I purposely decided that really had to be the first principle, because everything's going to start with self. We would like other people to do things that we would like them to do, but we don't get to control that. We would like to control that, but good luck with that. I mean, when was the last time you were successful in making somebody do almost anything with their heart, in their mind, right? But what we find is that a way to increase the level of know thyself is to ask for feedback. It's to do roundtables with employees and saying, when I'm operating at my best, what am I doing? When I'm not operating at my best, what am I doing? What is the impact of that? What do you want to know more of, less of? What do you need me to start, stop, and continue doing? Asking feedback about their particular leadership strengths. What do you think is a strength of mine? Where is an area of opportunity of mine? What gets in the way? What gets in your way? I mean, on and on and on. So whether it's a 360 formal feedback process where you're interviewing formally people, direct reports, peers, boss, etc., or whether it's roundtable conversations, which I like both, to be honest. The roundtable is more informal, roll up the sleeves kind of thing, maybe have breakfast together or whatever that is, but just let's just talk about what's really happening here. That informality has a tendency to, put the guard down and allow people to kind of invite people in more. So just on that principle alone, those are things that one can do. Also, checking yourself. I mean, I love to ask the question at the end of every day, was I a heart-centered leader today on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 highest, 1 lowest? Where would I rate myself today and why? And what do I want to do tomorrow as a result of that? So that's just a number of examples off one principle of what one can do. I mean, I think about, principle of know your impact. Again, that's that goldfish in the fishbowl thing. It's asking yourself the questions, what was my impact today? How did I come across? What was my intention versus what was potentially my perception? Am I proud of how I showed up today? Am I not? Why am I? Why am I not? So that sort of self-reflection and introspection is really, really important to course correct and getting feedback from others. And now, it takes courage to do that, but that's one of the things that people admire, and they admire the leader who shows that vulnerability, who asks those questions, who says, when I'm at my best, what am I doing? When I'm at worst, what am I doing? They admire that because they know it takes courage to stand there and take it, frankly. But they respect it that much more, which creates even more connection and more engagement, and they want that leader to succeed. And we see this time and time again with the leaders that we coach that are the star performers versus those that are in trouble, night and day around that. So those are just a couple of ideas.
Oh, yeah, and I'm kind of curious, is this, as I'm listening to you respond to that, does heart-centered leadership have to start at the top, or can it start anywhere within the organization?
The answer always is we'd love for it to start at the top, but that doesn't always happen. And this goes back to, listen, you need to work within your circle of influence. What can you control and what can you not? So what doesn't for sure work is to sit back and say, well, my boss isn't like that, so therefore it's all, all hope is lost. Or the guy at the very top or the woman at the very top isn't like that, so therefore that's just not the culture of this company, so I'm out. So the way I look at that is to say, but wait a minute, what can you do within your circle of influence? Maybe you're the frontline supervisor and your boss or your boss's boss or boss's boss's boss or whatever is not a heart-centered leader. Does that mean that you can't be? Of course you can be within your own group. Now, is it harder? Sure, it's harder. I mean, we would love to have this fabulous alignment from top to bottom. But honestly, that's a cop-out in my mind. I know it's difficult, but if you say to me, listen, I stand for this as a leader, this is who I am, this is how I'm choosing to work with my team, then you're making an impact on them and on yourself, and ultimately that performance is going to show itself. I've worked with many companies where that's exactly the question that came back. How do I do this when I'm the mid-level manager? And I can tell you right now, this company doesn't stand for a heart-centered leader. I'm like, okay, but what can you do? What can you do? And often we'll see those departments, those leaders, will outperform all the others. They have the lower turnover. They have the higher productivity rates. And, of course, the organization's like, why is it that, Mary over there or Tim over there seems to have the lowest turnover and everybody wants to work for Mary or Tim? Well, why is that? That certainly is noted by managers above, and hopefully they're interested enough to look at that and say, what is he or she doing? We hope for that. But even if that doesn't happen, it doesn't mean you still can't do what you know you need to do for yourself and for your people.
Well, as we look at, this, are there some ways you can share for us to be able to enhance our ability to be able to engage in these meaningful discussions with others? Because I think as I'm listening, that seems where all this really starts, is by having these discussions, right?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that, because I think the way I like to look at that is when you're in conversation with somebody, and this is really interesting timing for us because as an organization, my company, Steinbrecher and Associates, we are in the middle of building out all this new material. We see such a huge need for this, and we're certainly seeing our clients tell us they need help with this and their folks need help with this. It's how to have that mindful sort of collaborative dialogue. How do I do that when I'm not on the same page with somebody? We're misaligned, or their expectations are not my expectations, or their agenda is not my agenda, but there's an impact or a repercussion to the fact that we're not on the same page. We're building a lot of material around how do we help people get better at that. So one of the things that I like to do to simplify this is to say, listen, all of us have two primary needs. All human beings have these two big bucket of needs. One I like to call that emotional sort of ego need. And what that is at the end of the day is, I need to be valued, respected, appreciated, cared for, listened to, empathized with, involved, kind of thing. And so I have a tool that I call, for that name may be changing me right now. I'm calling it the golden rules, which is there's three things. If you do these three things, you're going to meet those ego emotional needs. And one of them is listening and responding with empathy, right? And one is making sure that you're at least affirming someone's, or at least maintaining or affirming their positive self-regard. You're involving people in things. You're asking their questions, input, ideas. Those kinds of things, those tools have a tendency to meet that side of the equation. The other side of the equation is, well, we've got a problem and we need a resolution, or we have a question, we need an answer. That's sort of that bottom line practical need for the conversation. Well, I have sort of a 6-step process that takes you from how do I start the conversation to how do I end the conversation. That is yet, another tool that helps people navigate through a conversation. But one without the other is not going to do it. I mean, if I share with you a 6-step process and I'm not keeping in mind as I'm on that journey, in that conversation, about making sure those emotional ego needs are met, it's going to be robotic and sound curt and to the point, and it's not going to work. On the other hand, if I'm only doing things like, gosh, I really value you, you're fantastic, and empathize and listen and all those things, I'm not getting anything done. So you sort of need both. So it's a process for how do we dialogue? Well, we dialogue by including both sides of that equation and sitting down and having the conversation and being very open to going for an outcome of a win-win versus I'm going to win and that person's going to lose. If you go into a conversation with that mindset, I can tell you right now, nothing good's going to come from that. The person's going to sense that all day long. Versus, I really want this to work for you. What does a win look like for you? This is what I need for me. This is what a win looks like for me. Can we collaborate together, co-create something to where we can both get that? And we're going to take the time and energy to do that. So that's the way you sort of set up those kinds of conversations.
And I'm sure, just like anything else, that as people are following your steps and your guidelines for how to do this, that they shouldn't expect to get immediate results right away. It's going to take a little bit of practice, and they're going to hone that skill that they have. Am I right in thinking that way?
Yeah, really, you're bringing up an excellent point because it makes me think now about some coaching situations I've had where a person, let's say, I was hired to help them, with the number one, statistically the top number one, 70% of leaders that derail are typically around lack of interpersonal skill. That inability to connect with people, engage people, work with a team effectively. It kind of falls under that bucket. And what I find is that when people are not skillful or something like that, they're practicing some very new behaviors. And I always have to say, listen, doing it one time is probably not going to be enough. And here we're human, so you're an autopilot on responding a different way, or what I really call reacting versus responding. What I'm trying to teach them is to respond versus react, because reacting gets us in trouble every time. It's an emotional sort of explosion, or a literally, as it says, a reaction to something versus something that's more contemplative and thoughtful. That's more of a response. But in this case, it's like you may take one step forward and three back. And this is where, acceptance to oneself, forgiving of oneself for not getting it just perfect, and also acknowledging to the person or persons that you're talking to, listen, this is an area, you said clearly in, let's say, my 360 that this is not a strength of mine. I'm working on that. I need your help to work on that. And what I'd like you to do is provide me feedback when I get it right and provide me feedback when I don't get it right. Now, that's, again, another courageous step, but the truth is they already know it. So by the very fact that you're saying, I know I'm going to get this right sometimes, and I know I may not get it right sometimes, and I need your help, then they, again, respect level goes way up for that leader, for showing that vulnerability, for declaring publicly that this, I know I'm not good at this, I'm going to try to get better. But there will sometimes be the two steps forward and one back, and that's with anything. It's called practice for a reason. You're practicing something. You're on the journey. It doesn't mean perfection. It means practice.
Well, I just love empathy, or really explaining that, because I think too many people just try something, don't see the immediate results, and give up on it. And I just think this is one of those topics that's so important for us to actually, like anything else, hone that skill that it's not going to come naturally to all of us right away. And so I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, Tim, to me, honestly, what this really is think about any new skill. If you're going to pick up golf for the first time and play golf for the first time, are you expecting a hole-in-one first time you practice? Of course you wouldn't. So why do we expect it in something 10 times more difficult, human behavior? You're going to go through 4 levels, right? What we call level 1 is what we call you're unconsciously incompetent, meaning I don't know what I don't know. Okay, now somebody's provided you feedback. You move to level 2, which is I'm now consciously incompetent. Oh, wow, didn't realize that. Didn't know I didn't know something there. Wow, got it. Well, then you learn a new skill. So now you move into level 3. Well, level 3 is I am now consciously competent. I have to think about everything really, really hard. Why? The neural pathways in the brain are not developed for that particular skill or function. You've got to develop it. It's got to be built. And that's something you have to do over and over and over again in order for it to get to what we call level 4, which you now have moved to full integration, autopilot sort of response. And that is when you're now unconsciously competent. You don't even know. And I use the analogy of driving a car. Very first time you learn how to drive a car, you're sitting behind the wheel and you're focusing very intently on every single thing you're doing. My hand's on the wheel, I'm looking out my side view mirror. You have to really think hard. Today you get in a car, you don't even know how you got home. Well, how did that happen? That happened from practice, right? So that's how full skill development and integration happens. So you're right, it's never going to be a one and done, and so our expectations are too high if we think it is.
Oh, well, I know we're getting into the last few minutes here. We got about just under 6 minutes to go, but I want to give you a little bit of time to tell us a little bit more about your book that you have out.
Oh, thank you. So Heart-Centered Leadership, it's interesting because the first edition, Dr. Bennett and I wrote about a decade ago, and people thought we just lost our mind because, the word heart and leadership in the same sentence just didn't really exist. But we looked at it and said, no, but it really needs to exist, and that's the problem. So we're gonna kind of boldly go out there and put it out there. Well, then now you'll see tons of books with the word heart and leadership in the same sentence, which is a good sign. That means we're finally kind of catching on here. So we went ahead and released the second edition recently. And so the good news is we're all sort of moving more in this direction. Is it perfect? No. Is there still opportunity? Of course. But we were very excited to be able to say, okay, second edition, here's everything we've learned in the last decade. Here's updated case studies, research, examples, companies that are doing this and doing this really well and what they've discovered. And that's the beauty, I think, of being able to come back after and release that second edition and be able to tell the story. And that's what we've really done in this second book.
And has there been anything in those 10 years since you wrote the first one to the second one that you've really seen that really changed?
Yeah, I think that the thing that's really shown up the most is all the additional business case research, because, of course, that's always the question. I mean, people would always say, yeah, okay, I get it. That's nice to be nice, and that's how they look at it, right? They'd say, this is all, touchy-feely and kind of kumbaya and whatever. And I'm saying, okay, listen, here's the deal. Let me ask you the question. This is what I would say to people. I said, I want you to think about the best boss you ever had in your entire career. I want you to get that person, picture that person in your mind. And then now I want you to think about what the behaviors are of that individual. What did this person say or do that had you think of that person? Normally the average length of time for that person that pops in that mind is about 10 to 15 seconds. That's really quick, right? And then we talk about, well, what were the behaviors this person demonstrated? Well, all the behaviors listed were things like this person empowered me, believed in me, cared about me. It's all meeting those emotional, ego, personal needs. And then I'd say, okay, great. Now tell me what was the impact that this person had on you. So they did all these things. What was the result of that or the impact on you? And what you always hear, top 10 list is always, well, I worked the hardest I could possibly work for this person. In fact, I'd be horrified if I let this person down. So if you don't think or they were motivated to work the very highest for this individual, or they wanted to succeed because they cared so much about this individual being successful as well as the organization. So the point to that all is if you're a leader and you have an employee that would, pretty much throw themselves in front of a bus for you, how does that not help you? Honestly, how does that not help you as a leader? How does that not help productivity, proficiency, and efficiencies of that business? You know it will. So what's great is all the research that's come out and all the examples of return on investment as a result has just really exploded. And things we kind of knew and knew intuitively from our own examples, we're able to now validate much more effectively.
That is fantastic. And just have one final question before we kind of wrap up here, and really curious on how you're going to answer this. Is there anyone in the public eye who needs these lessons more than anyone else?
Oh, that's really funny. Oh, my gosh, where do I start? Let me
I was going to say I only asked you for one, but you don't have to keep it to one.
Yeah, I would honestly say every political candidate that's in the finals at this point could use more of this. Oh, my goodness, it's crazy. It's a crazy political year, is it not? All those final candidates could use a little bit more heart-centered leadership. That's what I would say.
and I'm just kind of I would totally agree with you on the political landscape, regardless of which side you're on or who you're supporting.
Exactly. It doesn't really matter. It's bad everywhere at this point. That's just a personal opinion.
And as I listen to all this, Susan, I'm really fascinated because it does seem like the data is starting to come out to support all this. Is it moving from a shift of, because from what I'm implying is that a lot of this is more short-term, versus long-term thinking as far as a business goes, or is it really one and the same?
Well, I think, I would say embracing a heart-centered leadership type of culture is, to me, it's about building that kind of a culture, right? Culture is what an organization is made of. I mean, every company has a culture. They may think they don't, but they do. It's typically, created by the top person. If it's an entrepreneurial, obviously it's going to be by the founder often or others. But the point is it's making that determination of what kind of culture do you want to be. And if you decide that, leading in a more heart-centered way has obviously all kinds of rewards. We talked about the financial part of it, but it's also just that, there's leaders today. I mean, I talk to folks.
You know what, Susan? Let's
yes.
go over to Twitter on Work Trends hashtag. And I want to thank you and all the listeners, and join us next week at the same time to be here. Thank you so much, Susan.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you on Twitter.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.